Okay, we had the virus lockdowns and now we're paying for them. Australia, particularly Victoria, locked down very hard, didn't just close businesses, but playgrounds, even charged elderly women just sitting out there in the park in the open air. And like I say, now we must pay. We've got a massive debt. We've got a big jump in inflation, in part from all the stimulus spending. We've got interest rates rising. And we've got to ask, was it all worth it? Now, we're told that the lockdown saved lives while we waited to be properly vaccinated. But how true is that statement? And will we do the same thing all over again if there is another pandemic? Gigi Foster is a professor with the School of Economics at the University of New South Wales, and she has now done a very extensive cost-benefit analysis of the lockdown and joins me now. Professor, thank you so much for joining me. Were the lockdowns worth it?
Thanks so much for having me. I don't think so, no. And the answer to that question, of course, requires in the background a good comprehensive analysis of both the costs and the benefits of the lockdowns that we had over the last couple of years. And that is what I've been working on for over a year now, with the good help of Sanjeev Sablock, who is an ex-Victorian Treasury economist. And we just released this last week the full draft of the cost-benefit analysis with the executive summary up for public download. And basically it shows that lockdowns were not worth it, to the tune of a very staggering amount. So we estimate, based on all of the cost category estimates that we have, that lockdowns cost Australia at least 30 times the benefits that they could plausibly have delivered. And so it's a pretty damning indictment of the policies proven to have damaged Australia in many different facets. The whole document is about 140 pages long, but the executive summary is only about 15 pages. And so it's digestible even by the man on the street, I think.
Gigi Foster, let's leave the cost to one side for just a second. The benefits are supposed to be, yes, but the lockdown saved lots of lives, and how can you put dollars against saving lives? How did you come down on that question? Did the lockdowns actually save lives?
Well, they did postpone deaths, probably. And for that number, to get a handle on how many deaths they did postpone or avoid during the lockdown period, we turned to areas of the world that did not decide to go to lockdowns as their response to COVID, in particular Sweden and other countries, mainly in Europe, who opted to have a less restrictive response to COVID. So we use them as what we call in economics the counterfactual case, and we take their numbers or rates of COVID deaths as what we would have achieved here in Australia had we not had lockdowns. Now, on the question of whether or not one can apply a dollar value to a life, obviously in our everyday lives, that's repugnant and anathema. And if you were to ask any person on the street, how much would you pay for your grandmother's life to be extended by a year or 2 or 5, they would probably cite a very large figure, and that's natural and normal. But in a world of scarce resources, even a developed, rich country like Australia must allocate those resources across many different competing priorities, all of which potentially contribute to human well-being. And so in normal times, Australia allocates money to health preservation through drugs and new health interventions at a rate of roughly 100,000 Australian dollars per quality adjusted life year provided. And so that is the figure that we use in this cost-benefit analysis, because it's the evident Australian willingness to pay for a quality-adjusted life year that should have been applied to COVID interventions as well.
Now, I remember you getting a lot of grief when you suggested this kind of approach to things, during the height of the pandemic. I know that the Prime Minister abused me too for suggesting such a thing. But it seems to me that right now, your approach is tacitly, implicitly accepted by politicians, because we are seeing a lot of Australians dying from the virus every day, an average of 42 deaths a day. A year ago, there would have been huge news. Now it's virtually ignored. What does this tell you? Does it tell you that politicians do quietly agree that lockdowns aren't worth it, that 42 deaths a day from this virus is a price worth paying for not locking down?
I think it tells you that the decisions made over the past 2 years were not decisions made for the promotion of public health, but rather for the promotion of political careers. Full stop. And that was something that was done by Liberal governments and by Labour governments at the Commonwealth and state level. The Liberal may have been running the Commonwealth, but the Labour Party gave us the likes of Dan Andrews and Mark McGowan. So all of these people, in my mind, are complicit in the greatest policy debacle of my generation. I hope we're not going to see another one quite as bad.
I suspect we won't, given how they're dealing with things now. Professor Gigi Foster, thank you so much. Always fascinating to talk to you. Thank you.
My pleasure for being on the show. Thanks.